In Romans 1 verse 17, Paul says, "For therein is the righteousness of God revealed from faith to faith, as it is written, the just shall live by faith." What do the words "from faith to faith" mean? The usual interpretation of these words is that it refers to the development of faith within a believer over time. Similar to the saying "from strength to strength," there is the assumption that it implies a faith increasing over time. H.B. Mansfield, in his exposition of Romans, said the statement spoke of a steady progression along the path of faith. He said that the first faith in the statement is that which changes a sinner into a saint, and the latter occurrence relates to obedience as works are carried out over time. But in this video we will suggest an alternative explanation based on a distinction the scriptures make between faith before the crucifixion of Christ and the faith afterwards. Before we go any further, it is important to emphasize that there is only one faith. But what we will see is that over time the things which have to be believed in order to have faith in God have increased. In Romans 3 verse 30 and 31, Paul speaks about faith and justification. But what is not apparent in the AV, but which we have shown on the screen, is that in the original Greek some of the occurrences of faith have the word "the" before them. So the text should read, "Seeing it is one God which shall justify the circumcision by faith, and uncircumcision through the faith, do we then make void the law through the faith? By no means, yea, we establish the law." We find a similar thing in Galatians 3 verses 23 to 26. Note that in the order of the Greek text a word occurs between "the" and "faith" in the second occurrence of faith in verse 23, as shown on the screen. So these verses state, "But before the faith came, we were kept under the law, shut up unto the faith which should afterwards be revealed. Wherefore the law was our schoolmaster to bring us unto Christ, that we might be justified by faith. But after the faith is come, we are no longer under a schoolmaster. For ye are all the children of God by the faith in Christ Jesus." So what is the difference between faith and the faith? The answer was explained by Dr. Thomas in an article entitled "The Apostles Justified by Faith Before the Faith Came," which can be found in the book The Faith in the Last Days. He said, "Before the crucifixion of Christ, the apostles were Israelites under the law, which was then in full force, the Abrahamic covenant not having been confirmed by the blood of its mediator, the Christ. They were not required to believe in the mystery of its confirmation any more than the prophets were until the confirmation was established. They were under a dispensation of justification by faith, not of justification through the faith, because when they were justified, the faith had not come." Dr. Thomas suggested that the faith refers specifically to the set of doctrines which include those associated with the death and resurrection of Christ. During the mortal ministry of Christ, the disciples did not believe in or understand the need for Christ to die, but they were still justified in the sight of God, but by faith, not the faith. As Dr. Thomas went on to say, this was their faith. They believed the things covenanted to Abraham and David, and that Jesus was the Christ. But they did not understand nor believe, though it was told them that Jesus should be put to death and rise again. They did not know, in any sense of the word know, that there should be remission of sins to the prophets and themselves through the death and resurrection of Jesus. It is worth looking at one more quotation from this important article by Dr. Thomas, in which he makes clear the difference between faith and the faith. The reader then will bear in mind the distinction subsisting between justification by faith and justification through the faith. The apostles and prophets were justified or cleansed from all their sins by faith. But since the day of Pentecost, no Jew or Gentile can obtain pardon or purification by the same formula as they. To believe the word of the kingdom, and that Jesus is Son of God, will, since that notable day, save no man apart from the revealed mystery. Nor would the belief that the Christ should die and be raised again apart from the recognition of Jesus as the Christ and the word of the kingdom, save a believer. The area of faith was enlarged by the apostolic proclamation into the faith, so that after the day of Pentecost, the doctrine of the apostles presented people with more things to be believed for justification than were believed by Abraham, Moses, David, Daniel, or themselves. So, the word faith, depending on the context, can sometimes specifically refer to those things believed by the faithful in Old Testament times, and can sometimes refer to those things which constitute the gospel after the death and resurrection of Christ. In the latter case, the doctrines include all those believed by the faithful in Old Testament times. In both cases, it is the one faith. Now, it's important to note that the word "the" is not always put before the word faith when faith is referring to the beliefs of the apostles after the resurrection of Christ. For example, here in Acts 14 verse 27, it is the door of faith, not the door of the faith. So, returning to Romans 1 verse 17, we suggest that although the second occurrence of faith here does not have "the" before it, nevertheless it refers to the faith and doctrine specifically believed by the apostles after the resurrection of Christ. The first faith refers to the faith and beliefs held by those of Old Testament times and initially by the disciples. But how does the first faith reveal the righteousness of God to the second faith? The writings associated with the first faith, the law and the prophets, speak about the righteousness of God. The audience, as it were, for this revealing are the writings of the apostles. How does the Spirit, through Paul, demonstrate this? In Habakkuk 2 verse 4, the prophet, who had faith in God, reveals the righteousness of God with the words, "The just shall live by faith." Who does he reveal it to? To those of the faith held by the apostles. That Paul quotes the words from Habakkuk is evidence that it has been both revealed to the apostles and received by them. And this is how the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith.